Thank you to PCB Way for sponsoring this video. Ever since space exploration began, the idea of being able to glide back from space to Earth rather than just parachuting into the ocean started to gain popularity for its ability to provide a reusable and cost-effective way to return from space. Over the years, there have been many of these shuttle-like designs, most of them being flying bricks and some of them being flying bathtubs. And there's just something about seeing these super strange looking high wing loading aircraft actually be able to fly. This project originally started when I made this tiny boxy glider that was able to pull up right before the ground with the intention of it landing smoothly on the ground at a high speed, similar to the space shuttle. After that, I made a bunch of these drop gliders, some made out of foam and some 3D printed. And the point of that was to see if they could fly even with having super small wings and being super heavy. That project had very little success due to the fact my gliders were pretty crappy. I talked about this before, but this whole idea is greatly inspired by RC Test Flight's videos where he made FPV controllable drop shuttles. I'll link those videos in the description because I highly recommend you go watch them if you're interested in this concept. I still wanted to drop these free fall shuttles like I did before, but instead designed them in CAD and 3D print them to see if I could get a stubby wing glider to fly only if it's dropped from a high altitude. Since these gliders will have a super high wing loading and are going to be dropped from a plane with no guide, the shuttle needs to be able to self-correct so it doesn't just tumble down to the ground like a rock. In order for this to happen, the shuttle needs to be passively stable on all three axes of movement: yaw, roll, and pitch. For a plane to stay naturally straight on the yaw axis, it's given a vertical stabilizer behind the CG, which is the pivot point. The vertical stabilizer essentially acts as a wind vane, making sure the aircraft points in the direction of the wind. Without the vertical stabilizer, the glider is less likely to recover from a tumble and is more susceptible to flat spins. Next up is roll. Due to the fact these drop gliders are meant to have stubby wings, it's very easy for it to roll off to one side. That's also the same reason why fighters have stubbier wings than trainer aircraft, so then they have more maneuverability. But in our case, we want to make sure the glider wants to stay upright. To achieve this, we can give the wings a slight dihedral and move this vertical CG of the whole shuttle down. The way dihedral works is when the glider rolls off to one side, it will start to slip towards that direction. The slip action makes it so the wing facing the direction of the slip will generate more lift than the wing facing away, restoring the glider back to normal. A lower vertical CG just makes it so it acts less like an inverse pendulum. This can be done by making a flatter body. Last is pitch. Pitch is especially important in our case because our shuttles won't have horizontal stabilizers, which is what gives normal planes their pitch stability. The horizontal stabilizer is responsible for creating a downward force in the tail, which counteracts negative pitching moments of the main wing. To achieve the same effect with our tailless plane, the wing is given a slight upkick in the back or a twist in the wingtips. When our glider is dropped from a cargo plane, it will first point down since gravity is the dominant force. But once airspeed increases, the aerodynamic forces trying to push the tail down will become strong enough for the glider to pull out of the dive and fly off. But there's a very delicate balance with the CG because if it's not in the correct spot, the shuttle will either want to pull up prematurely, leading to a stall, or just keep nosing down to the ground. With knowing all that, I went ahead and Onshape and designed this first version of the shuttle glider. This first design had a couple problems which I'll talk about later, but you can see how I gave the airfoil that upkick and a negative twist in the wingtip. All these shuttles are going to be printed on my Quiddy XCF Pro. This printer provides a pretty big build plate, which is perfect for this project. Since these gliders are meant to have a high wing loading, they're printed in straight PLA. If I wanted them to actually fly well, I would print them in lightweight PLA, but that's not the point. To glue the halves together, I'm using some standard super glue. And to make it so the glider can hook up to the cargo plane, I used a soldering iron to push in a ring. I'm looking for better ways to attach the glider to the plane because this way makes the shuttle move around a lot when attached, which isn't great, but this way is probably the simplest.
262 grams. That seems really heavy.
After that, I printed another version with a longer nose. When printing my first few shuttle designs, I had problems with bed adhesion, which caused the sides to warp significantly. To fix the nose, I just filled it with hot glue, which probably wasn't the best idea.
This is super janky. It is not the best way to do it, but at least it works now, and the CG is now way farther forward, so at least we'll get some different results this way.
And to hopefully get footage of the shuttle from the sky, I added a RunCam 6 to the side of the cargo plane. This ended up not working that well because the plane was constantly moving, and the angle was too flat. On the first drop, the glider just seemed to tumble down all the way to the ground. And on the second one, it seemed to straighten out a bit better.
Flies! Oh!
But it ended up just circling down to the ground again. Not entirely sure why this would happen so suddenly, but it just looked like it got caught in a wingtip stall. I also thought this was happening because the CG was too far back on the shuttle, so I decided to try the one with the longer nose. and it was pretty clear that one, the CG was probably a bit too far forward. Already found it straight into the ground. Oh my god. Yeah, that is a lawn dart. I was pretty sure I was going to need to make some design changes to the shuttles, but I decided to give the original one more go, but from higher up. I couldn't tell when looking through the phone footage at the time, but it looks like it got caught in a big circle, then last second straightened out to forward flight, which is pretty spectacular to see. Okay, we have been looking for maybe a solid 15 minutes or longer, I have no idea. But all I know is it started to straighten out and flew past those trees. So, has to be somewhere over here. There's a chance it went over there, but to be honest, I really don't know how far it flew. I don't see any shuttle glider in sight. So, really, I have no idea. But I'll take another video if I do find it. But most likely, probably not gonna find it. About 30 minutes later, we did find it. And turns out it was nowhere near where I originally thought it was. The crazy part is, due to its flight path, if we had constant video of the flight, we probably would have been able to see the glider do a perfect landing all by itself, seeing how it pulled up right before the ground, which is pretty cool. But I would say the chances of this happening is pretty slim, and this shuttle will just get caught in spirals way too easily. So I wanted to make a version that could straighten out earlier. For this, I needed to print more shuttles, and that's when I asked PCB Way, the sponsor of this video, to help. PCB Way is a full service of PCB fabrication and assembly. They make it super easy to customize your PCBs, and all the specifications are included. For projects like what I'm doing, I like using their 3D printing, CNC, injection molding, and sheet metal fabrication services. To get this shuttle glider, all I had to do was send the file and choose the material. I get back this really nice quality print. They also CNC'd this carbon fiber landing gear plate for me. I just had to print it to make sure it fit and send off the file. Whoa. Damn. That is really nice. It's super nice to have access to these parts when I don't have the machines to make it. If you're interested, use the link in my description to get a free $5 coupon. Again, thank you to PCB Way for sponsoring this video. For the rest of the testing, I decided it would be a good idea to go to the middle of nowhere so I could drop the gliders from higher and not have to worry about the shuttles going too far. Going here ultimately turned out to be a poor decision on my part, but you'll see why later. The next shuttle design I printed was the exact same as the original, but this was because I now didn't have problems with bed adhesion. So this one had no warping on the sides. The first print had a little warping, so maybe this one would fly a bit better. In one of RC Test Flight's videos, he designed this 3D printed shuttle that he would drop from a drone, and it flew really well. And since he linked the Onshape document, I was able to print it. Because of how big it was really heavy. RC Test Flight didn't explicitly say how heavy it was, but I'm assuming it was around the weight of his solid wood plane, but I'm not entirely sure. But the final weight of mine was like 250 grams, so yeah, pretty heavy. Another thing I was doing while printing the shuttles was testing out the new cargo plane I built. I made this one to be bigger and more powerful to carry the heavier shuttles. Something I should have done instead is just drop the shuttles from a drone. Doing it that way would make it easier to observe the shuttles, make the drops more consistent, and make testing go by faster. But at the time I didn't have a drone that could carry the shuttles, so a plane was my only option. But anyways, back to printing. The next shuttle I designed was just a modified version of the original. It has a longer nose to move the CG further forward, more negative twist in the wingtip, and a thinner airfoil because I had a hunch the airfoil profile was too thick on the original. Pretty much all the shuttles I printed were meant to have chunky bodies and relatively small wings, so I decided to print one that had a smaller body and bigger wings to see if this one would actually fly well. And that was about all the shuttles I printed for this batch, and it was time to go test. I wanted to test the original design again to see if it would straighten out from the initial spiral, but both times I had no luck. Nah, it spirals again. Even when dropped from higher, it didn't seem like I had a chance, so I'm not sure if the shuttle got messed up or something, but most likely the other time it was able to straighten out was probably just luck, but I'm not entirely sure. After that, I tried the version that had no warping. Still the same design. but unfortunately the footage got blurry and the shuttle went out of view. But judging by how it fell and the fact we found the shuttle in the same area where it was dropped, I'm pretty sure it just tumbled like the first one. Since there was no warping issue to affect the flight characteristics, the issue is probably just that the CG is too far back. After that, some of the stuff needed charging, so we went out to go fly the Nano Wing, and it was pretty fun being able to soar in the middle of nowhere. I made a full compilation of the 4K footage in the flight in my last video, so you can go check that out if you care. Okay, so this one is I wrote a bunch of stuff here, but it's basically like the same proportions, but it has a thinner airfoil. It has a little more reflex, and has a little bit longer nose and more dihedral. So I think this one will do better because I'm pretty sure the issue is that the CG is not right for most of the gliders, but we'll just try it. Ready? Okay. I think that actually flew. The problem is that I'm releasing these, that time it wasn't too high or far away, it's just, I don't want it to be close to us, but the problem is now is that it's really hard to get on the camera. But it did look like that time it was actually flying, it's just we lost it in the sky, so I'll the other resorted to check the footage on the run cam. You can see going, but if it like landed really far away, then that must mean that it did actually fly. As you can tell, it did indeed fly, and still to this day, it's one of the most mesmerizing things I've seen. Just an orange speck flying off into the distance. It's pretty crazy how such tiny adjustments made such a big difference. I really wish I recorded my reaction when I watched the run cam footage because I was pretty stoked. But now there was the issue of trying to find it. This is truly like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But it said the haystack is like 42 acres. There's just no way. I mean, if it was like white, then I would pretty much just give up. But I feel like if it was orange, it should be easier to find. At the same time, I have no idea if I'm in the correct spot. Damn it. I really wanted to find that glider. Dang, nearly just stepped on that. Oh boy. You don't want to get bit by one of those. Okay, it's a little windy, but we got the flying wing with the run cam, and we're gonna use that as a search and rescue plane to see if we can find any orange speck in the grass, because it's most likely in the grass. But I don't know if this will work, but if it works, that will be pretty insane. This whole search and rescue mission idea probably would have worked better if I was flying FPV, but since I wasn't, I would just fly the wing around where I thought it was and wait till I got home to look through the footage. But before I would leave, I wanted to test out one more shuttle, but all that time spent looking for the other glider wasn't really a good idea because it was now extremely windy. Oh, there's so much wind. It is... Oh, it's gone. Once I got home, I went through the footage taken from the ground and tried to follow the shuttle the best I could. You can see how at first it dives straight down for a bit, then once it started going fast enough, the aerodynamic forces came into play and it does a big pull up into the sky. It's pretty cool to see how much altitude it was able to gain after the dive. After that, I analyzed the run cam footage and spotted this dot when the plane turned. I assumed that was the shuttle since it was the only visible dot in the area. Then I took screenshots at moments the glider was visible and Frankensteined the photos together to visualize the flight path. It's not perfect, but it gives a general idea to where it was flying. Doing all this was pretty cool, but it ended up just being pretty useless because there was just no way to pinpoint where it was just from a video and a 2D flight path. So then I decided to look at the flying wing POV, aka the search and rescue, and found nothing. So yeah, I was pretty much just going to give up, but to ensure I don't lose another glider, I bought these off-brand Apple tags to put in the shuttles, so I could hopefully find them if they were to fly off. And because the cargo plane was getting hard to see at times, I spray painted the whole thing orange, but this ended up looking horrible because the foam kept wanting to wrinkle even with thin layers of spray paint. But it's not for looks anyway, so I didn't really care. I decided to name the plane Cheeto Duster because it looked like it was covered in Cheeto dust. For my next batch of gliders, I wanted to make one based off a real-life shuttle, so I modeled up this 3D printable space shuttle. The only reason why I'm pretty sure this won't work well is because the wings are quite low and the body is pretty tall, so it's most likely to flip over since its vertical CG is higher up. But nonetheless, it's a pretty cool looking model. I also printed the same design that flew well, but with the GPS tag hole. And then because I wanted to try some weirder designs, I printed this forward swept wing one. I'm not going to go super deep into the wing design because I'm planning on making a separate video about it, but basically by having the wings swept forward, you essentially delay tip stalls, making flying at higher angles of attack possible. And for the last shuttle I designed, I just remodeled the one that flew well and made it more aerodynamic, but the angles and stuff were pretty much the same. I then reprinted the drop mechanism and replaced the original servo with a higher quality servo to prevent jamming, and also printed these wing edge slats so I wouldn't lose aileron control if I went too slow. We gave the shuttle another shot, but it again just went to the ground. I don't know if adding the GPS messed up the CG or the aerodynamics, or if it was because of the wind, but it's really hard to tell. To figure out what the issue was, I dropped the same shuttle that flew, but with no GPS.
Fly?
And I'm not entirely sure why it just dropped from the sky mid-flight, but it looks like it just got caught in a sudden aerodynamic stall. Although it didn't fully fly, it was much better than the one with the GPS, so most likely that was the issue. It looked like it was about to fly. Okay, so now we have the blue one. This one is the longer nose, the heavier nose, so I'm hoping this should fix the spinning down to the ground issue, because I'm pretty sure this is reasonable off bounds, but I'm not entirely sure. This drop was pretty interesting because instead of diving straight down at first, it looks like it took advantage of the plane's forward airspeed and immediately flipped over and started flying. But then it must have bled off too much airspeed because the wing dropped and it didn't recover. I really wanted to test this one again, but I really just wanted to get through all the shuttles I had because wind would come in the afternoon. And now it was time for the RC test flight shuttle. Because this one was pretty heavy, I got a really satisfying scale takeoff. And once the shuttle was dropped, you can see it dives for a long time before actually having enough airspeed to pull up. Then once it reaches the peak of its climb, it loses too much airspeed and falls out of the sky. The thing with the extremely high wing loading gliders is that if they lose too much airspeed, they essentially just become brakes and fall. So it might be better for these types of designs to be controllable so they follow a steeper glide slope to keep the airspeed up. Yeah, dang. Okay, it is really windy, so I don't know if you can hear me right now, but... Oh, look at the hole. It's covered in dirt. Oh, that's a problem. It's probably adding a lot of nose weight. Okay, so this is not ideal. There's another freaking thunderstorm, and that's how it's so windy. It was so calm before. But, yeah, the pressure differences are really affecting me right now. It's quite windy. So it is not as easy to fly now. We tried to wait out the storm, but we were in the car for like 2 hours and the wind wasn't getting any better, so we decided to call it. Since there were still a few shuttles we didn't test yet, I decided to just print 2 new ones. I wanted to focus my attention on this shuttle, the one that did the flip, and made it so the dihedral was instead curved. Looking back, I'm not entirely sure why, but I was hoping it would prevent it from rolling over as easily. I printed that and then printed a version with no GPS hole because I'm pretty sure the tag was affecting a lot of the gliders. We went out to go test yet again, and that's when the project came to an end. Because while we were setting the plane up, and I didn't get any recording of it, but basically someone came up to us and told us we gotta go. So of course we left, and that was pretty unfortunate because it was really the only place I could find to do the drop testing. So yeah, I was pretty bummed out I couldn't finish dropping all the shuttles, but at the same time I was kind of glad it was over because doing this whole thing was getting pretty stressful, dangerous, and was beginning to go out of my comfort zone. So I highly doubt I'll return to this project, mainly because it's just not safe even when doing it in an open, isolated area. Projects I'll probably do instead are the autopilot gliders and the controllable lifting bodies because those are meant to be made out of foam and stuff, and those ideas are much safer and smarter than letting a piece of plastic flying super fast wherever. So yeah, this project has been my biggest I've done yet, so I hope you enjoyed it, and bye.